Hey, creeps and creatives. Welcome to the very first episode of Acrylic After Dark. I'm Luna Val, and while I bring a pair of plain shoes to life, we're diving into the darkness of real crime, mystery, and the truly bizarre. You won't always know what I'm creating, but by the end, maybe you'll start to see it. I did go ahead and prep my shoe for purposes. So I did go ahead and sketch out what I'd be drawing. So you might already have an idea of today's story. If you do, comment down below. I'd love to see if you got it right. I will also be listing the products that I am using every time in these videos. But for today, I am using the Angelus paint, which is my go-to. So if you, sorry, I'm not sure which direction, but I'm using the Angelus leather paint. And if you're like, Luna, this isn't a leather shoe. Yes, I know this. So I am actually using the Too Soft fabric medium. So I've already applied this onto the shoe, which basically I put a coat on here and then I use a heat gun to dry it. And then what happens is it basically just makes it flexible. And so I'm able to like walk around in the shoe. It's not going to crack or, bend. And then we will seal it with the matte acrylic finisher. This basically will just seal all the color that we're having. And then lastly, we'll use the Angelus waterproof spray, which will make this shoe waterproof. And you can go in the pond, the water, whatever. I mean, within limits, can't be in the swimming pool, but it will make sure that this kind of stays safe. So if you have any questions, want to learn anything new about these products, just let me know and I'd be happy to answer them. I will try to have my shoes prepped before videos just so it makes it easier. Um, but yeah, we're gonna just slowly get into this. I do want to let you know, um, for future videos. On this one, I do have it kind of towards the end. I kind of jump to what the design already is, just because I know that this video is taking a long time. If you guys are okay with longer videos, like an hour, let me know. Or if you like the shorter videos, I can kind of time lapse this. But I wanted to make sure that I didn't spend too much time trying to paint this shoe. I do try to do as much as possible, and kind of towards the end, I will kind of adjust. We'll see where I'm at. And if I feel like I'm taking too much time, then I will just edit this video afterwards and correct it. But hopefully I'll get done in a good time for you guys. But before we do get into it, a quick heads up. This episode contains mature content, including real crime, disturbing details, and graphic imagery, so viewer discretion is strongly advised. Today, we're talking about one of the most infamous unsolved murders in American history, the story of Elizabeth Short, better known as the Black Dahlia. The story has been told many times. Back then, it was told really carelessly and cruelly. I'm not here to, you know, discredit or put down Elizabeth's life or her death. She was more than a victim. And there's so much information out there, from wild theories to false accusations and, you know, false confessions. But I just want to share Elizabeth's story with care and respect. Because, like I said, the media at the time did everything but that. They tore her and her family apart. And again, at the end of the day, Elizabeth was a young woman. I mean, her life was stolen from her when she was 22 years old. And during her time, she was just trying to find her way. And I just want to make sure that we remember that in all the stories that we go through together. So, Elizabeth was born July 29th, 1924, in Medford, Massachusetts. She was born to Cleo and Phoebe Short. Now, Cleo was a World War I vet who later jumped into the mini golf craze, in the 1920s, which I did not know that mini golf was a craze back then. For some reason, I thought it was later in history, but I guess not. It was the 1920s. But yeah, it was huge then, and Cleo loved it. He loved anything mini golf. He loved doing his job, he loved his business, but the Great Depression hit and his business failed, and he did not take it very well. So in 1930, he actually left his car by a bridge, and it was assumed that Cleo ended his life by jumping off the bridge. And, because there was no body, he disappeared, they just assumed that and they notified the family. However, you know, it would later be discovered that isn't the case. But his wife, was devastated. His five daughters were devastated, and Elizabeth was just six. Now, side note, first side note, and this is just my personal take, but I've always felt a little torn about Cleo in this situation. Now, in future situations, I'm not going to jump ahead, but in this situation, I was torn because PTSD wasn't understood back then. They called it shell shock, and it wouldn't be recognized as a real disorder until the 1980s. So I can't defend what he did, but I do think it's worth considering how broken people can become, especially after war and economic collapse. Like, you have two major things that happened. Still, like I said, come to find out, Cleo did not commit suicide. He actually later came back and apologized to Phoebe, but Phoebe was not having it. I mean, what do you say when you find out your husband actually didn't kill himself? He just abandoned you and your kids. So she didn't take him back, and you would think, oh, okay, well, maybe he'll stick around, he'll prove himself, he'll show that he's going to stay there under bad, circumstances and situations. No, mm-mm, no, no, he did not. He dipped out again and moved to California and never reached out to his family again. He never reached out to them again. And as you can imagine, this did have a profound effect on his family. Phoebe was left alone to take care of their five daughters, and they had no idea why their father left. Like, the kids had no idea why their father decided to leave. So I will say this, Phoebe did an amazing job as a mom. I did look into, their kids in the future, and it seemed like all of them just found their niche, found their thing, and they thrived in their life. They had kids, grandkids, they did amazing things in their time. And so, props for Phoebe for continuing on and raising a beautiful family. And, I am so sorry for the family's loss when it comes to Elizabeth, because it really did seem like she had a bright future in front of her too. But as you'll find, situations in her life happen, and it just sadly, this did not end well for Elizabeth. But like I said, all the daughters seem to have found things that they were really interested in. And for young Elizabeth, she was drawn to beauty, glamour, and all things Hollywood, what most little girls are into, especially back then. And according to some reports, she really could have been like a movie star, and people told her this. She was very beautiful. Elizabeth had the dark hair, light blue eyes. She would wear black dresses, red lipstick, and she would just carry herself. And she had that old Hollywood magnetism where, she'd walk into a room and own it without saying a word. And she rolled with it. She's like, man, maybe I could take Hollywood by storm, which is what she did. So after high school, and there's mixed information about whether she graduated or not, and I'm not going to speculate, but after high school, she decided to take Hollywood by storm and try to reconnect with her father in California. Now, like I said, Cleo did not reach out to his kids or his wife ever again. But Elizabeth did reach out to her dad and told him that she wanted to come to California. She wants to try and be an actress, and her dad was open to having her come. And Elizabeth saw this as a chance to rebuild their relationship. Unfortunately, this would go this wouldn't last long. I think Elizabeth was there for less than 2 weeks before she decided to leave. It was said that Cleo was a very heavy drinker, and when he did drink, he was a very mean drunk, and he turned very mean towards Elizabeth. Whenever she would stay out, he would get upset. If she slept in, he would get upset. And if she wasn't cleaning and maintaining the house, he would definitely get upset. At the end of the day, Cleo just wanted a live-in housekeeper, and he really truly didn't want a relationship with his daughter. So Elizabeth felt that, and she left, and she never spoke to her father again. And I couldn't find anything to say otherwise, but I think that was the last time that Cleo ever did see his daughter alive again, which is so sad that that's how that ended. And I it seemed like you had great kids, and it's sad. It's sad that you didn't continue that with them. At least want to be part of their life. Even if you couldn't be married, you could have still been a part of their life. But Elizabeth didn't let this hold her down. In 1943, she would actually go to Camp Cook, which is also known as the Vandenberg Air Force Base now. And during her time there, she was living it up. She was having her best life. She had a job, she was a cashier, she was meeting new people, and they actually voted, she would be voted at the camp for being the camp cutie. And she was loving it. Unfortunately, this job wouldn't last though because Elizabeth was loving it way too much. And on September 23rd, 1943, Elizabeth was at El Paseo restaurant in Santa Barbara, California, and she was drinking. Now, Elizabeth was only 19 at the time. I'm not sure how it came about. I don't know if somebody reported her or the restaurant reported her, but the police actually came because she was drinking and she was underage. Now, I again, we've all, we've all been kids. Now, real quick, do you see this little spot right here? Don't worry about it. That's not where I want it. It is a mistake, but we're gonna fix it. You're never gonna know that it was there, but I just wanted to address that real quick. So, anyways, she was caught underage drinking. They did process her. They took her fingerprints and her picture and, you know, and everything, but ultimately the police actually let Elizabeth go, and they actually bought her a ticket to go back home to Medford, Massachusetts. And I think they were just, she's young, she's just having a good time, but maybe she needs to be back home. She's not ready to be in California yet, is what I'm thinking. It didn't say that, but that's what I'm thinking. So Elizabeth would go back home and be with her family again. However, during the winter months, Elizabeth would actually go to Florida. Now, the reason she would go to Florida is because Elizabeth could not handle the Massachusetts winter months. She had really bad asthma and like severe bronchitis. So she would leave during the winter months to Florida and work as a waitress. Now, during her time, though, she actually ran into a gentleman named Matt Gordon, who was a major, and he was there because he got injured, so he was actually in recovery. So on February 25th, Major 1944, sorry, Major Matt Gordon was injured, and he was 26 year old, like he was a fighter pilot, but he was piloting an L-5B Sentinel reconnaissance plane, often referred to as the Flying Jeep, which is just a funny name. But during the time, Major Gordon was searching for a downed pilot when his own aircraft went down. Now, obviously, he would survive because, like I said, he met Elizabeth during his recovery. And Major Gordon was everything that a young 20-year-old Elizabeth would want. And she was over the moon and was so happy. Like, basically, she wanted to be a wife and a mother. Her idea of what she wanted for the future was changing. She was kind of looking past the Hollywood scene and was seeing more of a future with, the major. Now, okay, side note, these little spots here, obviously I am a very messy painter, as you can see, and I'm getting paint everywhere. But we are actually going to take some nail polish remover, but this is why I have this, so I can wipe my hands and it's all clean. So, ta-da! But we will actually take nail polish remover and wipe this down and it will get rid of all of it. So we'll kind of wait towards the end. I may do it before I work on to the next part, just depends. But sadly, Elizabeth and Major Gordon would never see wedding bells. as Major Gordon would die when he went back after recovering. He would die in a plane crash near West Bengal, India on August 10th, 1945. His death came just a few weeks before Japan's official surrender on September 2nd, 1945, thus ending World War II. Now, like I said, Elizabeth was devastated. I mean, she was willing to wait for Major Gordon. She wanted a life, she wanted to be a wife, and it was just ripped from her. And she just felt really lost. She would never work again. She would have no true serious relationship. And she just, I think she just stopped caring about a lot of things. She actually ended up homeless, and she would just drift from friends to families' homes and would stay with whoever would let her in. Now, in December of 1946, Elizabeth would actually run into a woman named Dorothy French. Now, Dorothy was working as a cashier at the All Night Aztec, which I believe was a movie theater. I could be wrong. But Elizabeth basically just dumped everything on Dorothy. Like, told her whole life story, told her about Major Matt Gordon, her dad, just everything. And I think she just needed to talk to somebody. And I think there's a saying where it's just easy to talk to strangers, like talk to somebody you don't really know because you're never going to see them again? So it's like they can judge you, but are they really, you're never going to see them again. Knowing my luck, though, I'd probably see people again. But so Dorothy just felt really bad for her, and she actually offered for Elizabeth to stay at her home with her mother and brother until she kind of got back onto her feet. Now, like I said, Elizabeth had relationships, but they were never serious. It basically would just be little dates. And she would tell these dates she had a job, yeah, I work here, and oh, I'm doing this. Basically, she would kind of, you know, change how her life was, depending on who she was with. She just was a different person with each one. And I think it just speaks volumes that she was kind of struggling with who she was now, that she didn't have Major Gordon. And so she would tell some people she worked at the airport or a cashier or whatever at the time. And it would be confirmed later by Dorothy's mother that Elizabeth didn't have a job and would actually stay out super late and sleep throughout the entire day. She hit this wall. She didn't know what to do anymore. Now, she would continue going on little dates. She did actually wind up meeting a traveling salesman named Robert Red Manley. Now, mm, Robert. So Robert would later tell police that he, quote, saw Miss Short standing on a corner across from the Western Airlines. I looked at her and decided to try to pick her up. My wife and I had just had a baby and we had to go through sort of an adjustment period. We had lots to iron out. It was nothing important, but just lots of little things, so I decided to pick her up and make a test for myself and see if I loved my wife or not. I asked her if she wanted a ride. She turned her head and wouldn't look at me. I talked some more. I told her who I was and what I did and so forth. Finally, she turned around and asked me if I didn't think it was wrong to ask a girl in a corner to get in my car. I said yes, but I like to take you home. So she got in the car. End quote. What a gentleman. You can't find people like that no more. I mean, he's testing his relationship, wants to know if he's got true love with his wife, so he's picking up Elizabeth on the corner. Now, this would be the beginning of their relationship. They were said to communicate with each other for the remainder of December, and whenever Elizabeth needed a ride, she would call Robert. So that's basically all that's what the relationship was, is if, hey, you're in town, I need a ride, can you come get me? Which she wound up needing a ride in early January of 1947. Elizabeth called Robert and asked if he would drive her back to Los Angeles. Now, Elizabeth told Robert that she wanted to see her sister, Virginia, but she just needed a ride up there. She was planning to meet her at the Bitmore Hotel, and Robert agreed. He's like, yeah, I can take you there. That's no problem. So he actually met her on the 8th at the French's home. This would be the last time that Dorothy and her family ever saw Elizabeth. Elizabeth told them, "Thank you so much. Basically, I'm going to get out of your hair." I think at this time, Dorothy's mom did admit like she was getting very set because Elizabeth wasn't working. She was just sleeping. Like I said, she was sleeping all the time during the day and then she was out all night. So I think Elizabeth just kind of felt the tension. So she told them, "I'm going to go see my sister. I have Robert coming to pick me up and everything will be okay." So he did pick her up. They drove up the coast. Robert said that they did stay at a motel, but they were very platonic. Nothing happened between them. They did nothing at the time. And many people didn't believe them, but I'm kind of torn. I don't think anything really happened between them. But again, we weren't there, so just leave that alone. So, however, when they get there, Elizabeth checked her luggage in at the bus depot. Now, I'm assuming she was going to take the bus from where Robert took her. I'm not entirely sure what neighborhood they were in, but I'm assuming she was taking the bus and going to Bitmore. She, didn't want to inconvenience Robert anymore, but Robert actually refused to leave her there because it was a really sketchy neighborhood and he just didn't feel comfortable, leaving her there. So he insisted, like, "Look, I'll take you to the Bitmore. It's not a big deal." And, ultimately she's like, "Okay, that's fine." Now they get to the Bitmore. He does wait around with Elizabeth. She kept saying, "Yeah, Virginia's probably just running late," because hours would pass by. And Robert would go and ask, the front desk clerk if he saw anybody by this description. They would say no. They would look. Robert said he kept asking Elizabeth to call, and she said she would, but nobody was answering. And it would later be determined and discovered that Elizabeth lied about Virginia coming to meet her. Like, Elizabeth had no idea that, or sorry, Virginia had no idea that Elizabeth was even trying to come and see her. And so, you know, Robert didn't know this at the time. And so when 6:30, 7 p.m. rolled around, Robert basically was telling Elizabeth, "I'm so sorry, but I have to go back home to my family," because he had to drive all the way back down. He's tested his love. He loves his wife. He wants to go back home to his wife, basically. And so, you know, Elizabeth tells him, "I completely understand. Go ahead and go." And so sorry, I'm having to concentrate real quick. So these really, my tip for right here, really close to the shoe is there are times where I mess this up. And it's even more nerve-wracking on a video, but anything that you do get on this rubber part, because I'm not sure the name, like I said, you can use um, nail polish remover. And if you're wondering why I haven't really changed brushes, it's because a lot of times, even the bigger brush, I'm able to get more coverage. And I don't know if you've been able to see it, but this shoe is soaking up a lot of paint. So I'm having to like re-go through areas. And I'm even noticing, like if you can see here, like the white still, even after going with black. So, you know, um, if the way that I'm moving my shoe around or anything like that bothers you guys, I promise I will get into the groove of it. Any suggestions or, tips and everything, much appreciated. Hopefully I get better at doing it on video for you guys. But back to the story. Um, so this would be the last time that Elizabeth would be seen. Now, there are reports that the police got tips of eyewitnesses seeing her before her death, but nothing's confirmed. So, as far as I know, Robert is the last person to see Elizabeth ar- alive. And so the police, you know, kind of had to interview Robert. They asked him, he told his wife, and they subjected him to a polygraph test. They asked, "Would you be willing to do a polygraph?" And he said yes, which he passed. Robert passed with flying colors. And Robert's wife, Harriet, even supported saying that he was home at a certain time. Now, even though Robert passed the polygraph test, he was constantly hounded by reporters after Elizabeth's death and after they found her body. He was constantly hounded. They did not care if he passed. They made accusations, they accused him, and this ultimately resulted in him struggling mentally. And in 1954, Harriet, Robert's wife, had him committed because he was hearing voices. And she was really just concerned. She still loved her husband even through everything. Robert actually was committed, like I said, because he was hearing voices. And the doctors at the time actually gave him sodium pentanol. Now, sodium pentanol, and I'm hoping I'm saying that word right, was basically like a truth serum. It's supposed to make you more susceptible to telling the truth. And so when they gave him this, the cops actually returned back and was asking him questions about Elizabeth. Robert stuck to his story. Nothing changed. He swore up and down. He dropped Elizabeth off. He left at 6:30 because he had to go home, and that was it. And so they ruled him out completely, I guess, at that point. Now, Robert would pass away exactly 39 years from the day he dropped Elizabeth off at the Bitmore Hotel. Robert died January 9th, 1986. My mind was like boggled at that. Like I couldn't imagine being accused of something when I knew I really didn't do it. Like obviously he was not innocent. But it's like I couldn't imagine being accused of something that I really didn't do, struggling, and then I die on the day that I last see her. Ugh, like the irony in that. Now, as for Elizabeth, this is where we started getting into some graphic details, and I just wanted to let you guys know this. So on the morning of January 15th, 1947, in Lemert Park, I'm sorry if I'm butchering that, but Lemert Park, Los Angeles, Betty Bersinger, a mother who was walking her 3-year-old daughter, or 3-year-old child, I'm not sure if it was a daughter, but her 3-year-old child discovered Elizabeth's body while they were out running errands. Now, at first, Betty said that she assumed it was a mannequin because the figure was just really pale, motionless, and it just didn't seem right. Like, it just didn't look how you would picture a human body to look. Like, it just, there was no way that the human body could even look like this because it was very grotesque. However, people would soon see that this wasn't a mannequin at all. Now, it said Lemire Park, but when you look at the images, there's houses across, and where the body was found, it was basically in a grass, but it was right next to a sidewalk. And then there's houses right across the street. Like there's no shrubs or anything. Like it's clear as day that there's somebody laying there. And so people quickly saw that, yeah, there's this isn't a mannequin. And when police arrived, they quickly saw this gruesome scene. So the body was cut clean in half at the waist. She was drained entirely of blood. And like I said, she was just discarded by the sidewalk. She was right there, maybe less than 10 feet away from the sidewalk. Now, they found that the body showed signs of assault. There were ligature marks on her wrist, ankles, and neck, which would suggest she was held captive. The face had been slashed ear to ear, which we know that as kind of like the Joker smile, but back then it was called the Glasgow smile. Now, the lower half of her body was positioned actually a foot away from the upper, and her intestines had been tucked neatly beneath her buttocks. Now, they know that whoever left the body there didn't just leave it there. Like, it was posed in a way where somebody would physically have to pose the body in this way because her hands were above her head. Her elbows were actually bent at right angles, like right 90-degree angles, and her legs were spread apart. Detectives found a cement sack nearby containing like watery blood. There was also a heel print on the ground near some tire tracks. So clearly somebody came in and drove off. There was actually no blood anywhere. like I said, she was completely drained of blood. But the weird thing was, is there was no blood anywhere, not in the grass, not sidewalk, nowhere. And so this led the police to believe that this was the dump site. Elizabeth was clearly killed somewhere else. Now, the body was cut in half using a method taught in the 1930s, and I'm not even going to attempt to say this because I know I'm going to butcher it, but here's this word, and if somebody can tell me how to pronounce this, this would be great. But what this means was her lower half had been removed by cutting her lumbar spine between the third lumbar vertebrae. Now, this would be important later. Coroners, the coroner noted that there was very little bruising around the incision line, which did suggest that this act was done post-mortem, which thank goodness. I guess thank goodness that she didn't have to feel that, but there's no telling what Elizabeth went through during this because, you know, Elizabeth actually was seen on the 9th. She was found on the 15th. 7 days. 7 days went by. And so, I didn't see a time of death or what they assumed to be time of death, and I'm so sorry. I guess I should have. But Elizabeth wasn't seen for 7 days, so there's no telling what she went through during those 7 days, or if she was alive or what. And I like I said, I just think I'm glad she didn't feel that part because that probably would have been very, very gruesome. But he also noticed and noted a gaping like laceration, which measured around 14 and a half inches in length, that went from the navel to the pubic bone area. Now, again, as terrible as it was for Elizabeth getting arrested for underage drinking, because all kids do this, that would ultimately be how they figured out it was Elizabeth. That and because she worked at Camp Cook. But everything said it was because of the arrest, because of the fingerprints, but more than likely it was due to her actually working on an Air Force base, which would make more sense because I'm assuming they did, you know, background checks, or it may not even have been a thing back then. But the only thing I can think of in this instance is at least the family knew and they didn't have to wonder. You know, some families who have loved ones that have been missing or killed still don't even know where their loved ones are. So, I mean, at least Phoebe didn't have to wait. The only tragic thing is the way that Phoebe found out. I would not wish this on my worst enemy for Phoebe. This is just terrible, terrible. So, and I'm getting into that part. So once the name of the victim was released, the swarm of vultures descended. And yes, talking about the media if you didn't pick that up. I mean, reporters saw it as an opportunity to pry into every detail of Elizabeth's life. Now, I'm going to clean this up real quick and try to not get any paint back on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these little cotton balls and I'm just putting nail polish remover on here. Like I said, I think you can do alcohol. I've never really tried it, but I'm just going to show you. So I'm going to wipe this and see how easy it comes off. It just comes right off. So it really won't smear. Some of them do. Some of them are harder stains. There might be a couple of them that are very faint. Now, another thing you can do that I found a trick of is like painting over that specific spot and then doing the nail polish remover again, which does help. Um, you know, the this little groove part here, this might take a little bit of time. I have Q-tips, so I'll try to do that as well. Now, Q-tips are really good for the really, fine corners right here. Right, this is just smearing it. Okay. So for this, I might just put paint over it and try to do it later, but yeah. the Q-tips are really good for these like little small indent corners and things like that. But if anybody has like an easier way to get the paint out of the sides, I would appreciate it. Um, like I said, I'm I'm kind of a messy painter. Um, I love painting, but I always wind up with paint everywhere. Uh, does not matter. My hands, my hair, it doesn't matter. I really need to be more careful. So, but as you can see, this just comes off super simple, and I will make sure to double check this and everything before you finish. So, the swarm of vultures. I'm just kidding. Again, they wanted to know everything about Elizabeth's life, and it did not matter if it was good, it was bad, any speculation, any rumor, it did not matter if it was true, if it was false. It filled column after column in the newspapers, and people were eating it up. And eventually, they dubbed her as the Black Dahlia, which is how she got this name. And it was actually inspired by a film noir called The Blue Dahlia, and this was in theaters the year prior. Now, immediately after she was identified, the reporters from the Los Angeles Herald contacted Phoebe Short in Boston. Now, it wasn't just to like give condolences or anything like that. They actually told her that they were contacting her because her daughter had won a beauty contest. And so they were wanting to find out everything about Elizabeth. They wanted to know about her life, about anything that her mom could say. And her mom was over the moon that Elizabeth won. Like, of course, her daughter won. She is beautiful. She was so proud of her beautiful daughter. And she was just telling them everything, and they were just eating it up. Now, once they got all the information that they wanted, that's when they decided to callously tell her that Elizabeth had in fact been murdered. Mm, just yeah, yeah. I couldn't imagine, and thank goodness that they can't do that now. But can you imagine being told that? And Phoebe didn't believe them at first. She really thought it was like a cruel joke, you know, that there's no way that her daughter was dead. She would feel it. She would know. Like deep down, she would know that her daughter had died. But it was confirmed when the Medford police finally came to her house and told Phoebe that they did find her daughter and her daughter was in fact murdered. Now, the reporters contacted Phoebe again and apologized greatly for the whole thing and told them that they wanted to make her up and that they would actually fly her in to LA so that way she can go ahead and identify her daughter's body. And so they would fly her in and they would get her accommodation, and that way she can help the police. Now, this would be a lie because they just wanted to protect their scoop. They kept forcing or kept wanting Phoebe to go and identify it, but Phoebe didn't want to at the time. She was struggling. She did not want to go and identify her daughter's body. She was just having a really hard time with the whole thing, and they just kept hounding her and, kept saying, "Oh, we'll take you and do this." And the police, were trying to get a hold of her and they were not telling her. And so finally she just went to the police station herself. And yeah, I just, again, I can't imagine going through this whole situation. Like finding out your daughter passed away, talking about your daughter because you thought she won a beauty contest, and then being told afterwards, after you doted on your daughter about this, and then you think that they're making it up, and come to find out they're really not. So, if you're wondering why Elizabeth's father, Cleo, didn't identify her, well, this is where I said in the beginning, like I only had defense for that one situation. This is where I have no defense for Cleo, as I can't imagine acting the way that he did at all. The police actually did show up and notify Cleo, but he refused to identify Elizabeth's body. And he told them, no, not doing it. You can go contact my ex-wife, and made Phoebe go do this. So he didn't identify her. That's why they had to go. And on top of that, when the funeral finally happened, Cleo refused to attend her funeral. Mind you, you basically treated your daughter like a house, like you wanted a live-in housemaid. You never saw her again. You make her mother travel all the way from Massachusetts to come and identify her, which I'm sure is hard. And then you couldn't even be at the funeral. And as you can imagine, this gave him backlash. There was people not happy with this. And his actions was to justify this by saying, quote, I didn't want anything to do with her or any of the rest of the family then. I was through, end quote. So I'm guessing he's just saying, well, I washed my hands of them. I didn't want nothing to do with them. And I meant that. I mean, I did tell them in advance. They should have known. I mean, what a horrible person. Horrible. So January 21st, 1947 rolls around, and an editor at the Examiner of Los Angeles, the newspaper, was contacted by a random person. So they called and claimed to be the killer. The caller actually praised the editor for their coverage of the murder. They they praised them. Okay. All right. And he told them, "Look, I'm planning to eventually hand myself in to the police, but I want the LAPD to chase me a little while longer." Now, when I read that, I was like, what's that movie with Leonardo DiCaprio? Chase Me If You Can? That's what that reminded me of. Now, I know that movie came out like way later, and so I'm wondering if they like took that from this, but it's really? So you want them to chase you? Are you bored? You know? I guess maybe he was just cocky, like, yeah, they're never gonna find me. So yeah, he decided to tell him like, look up, I'm planning to turn myself in, but I wanted to give you I'm giving you a surprise. And so he told the editor to expect some souvenirs of Elizabeth's in the mail and that it should be arriving soon. 3 days later, on the 24th of January 1947, a suspicious manila envelope came in, and it was addressed to the Los Angeles Examiner and other Los Angeles papers. I guess he was just saying, like, whoever wants to come get this, here's this. Now, the envelope included a letter using cutout words from newspaper clippings, kind of like how you see in these movies now for a ransom, where they have like different. I took an A from like the newspaper, and B from the, you know, grocery store ad or whatever, but he put different clippings together, and the clippings said, quote, here is here is Dahlia's belongings. Now, inside the envelope, there was Elizabeth's birth certificate, her business cards, photographs, names written on like random pieces of paper, and then her address book. Now, all of the contents, and let me mention this first. The coroner did let the police department, so when they were doing Elizabeth's autopsy, they found that they couldn't get any forensic evidence off her body because her body was completely cleaned with gasoline. Like whoever killed her doused her whole body with gasoline to destroy any forensic evidence on the body. And the same thing was done to this envelope, which led police to believe like this is definitely from the killer because that information was never given to anybody. They didn't put it in the newspaper, they didn't, blast it anywhere. So this was information that was not let out. Now the reporters have it now, but at the time they didn't before that. So police were convinced that this was definitely from the killer. And so, the police kind of took all that. They definitely went through the address book. They contacted everybody within that address book, but ultimately they found that, everybody kind of just said, we knew her briefly. There's speculation about the amount of men that were in the address book, but again, I'm not going to speculate or say if it was true or not. I don't know. They just contacted everybody that was in this address book, and ultimately they came up empty-handed because everybody said that they just knew Elizabeth briefly. They met her in a short encounter. She just was very easy to talk to. She was just super friendly, and that was how they knew them. And so they just came to a dead end when it came to the address book. Authorities suspected someone in the medical field, though. And the reason they came to this conclusion is we're going back. Do you remember the way that the body was found? Well, they didn't realize it at the time, or maybe they did and they just didn't put it together. But there was actually a medical school, the USC Medical School, which was located close to where Elizabeth's body was found. The school was right down the road. And so they started conducting interviews. They also had a suspect that was a doctor. And I will cover the suspect a little bit later. But they actually had a couple of suspects. But when they did several interviews and background checks, they were no closer to solving the case. Everything came back like squeaky clean. Sadly, the police would get over like 60 confessions, but all turned out false and received like many false eyewitness testimonies. I mean, basically everybody, men, women, the confessions, it wasn't just men, it was women as well. But I think at the time, it was such a high profile case. The news was just, the media was just putting out false accusations, false accusations. She was being named after a movie. All these people wanted the attention and the fame. And it was hard for the police to really know who was a viable suspect and who wasn't. And that was a lot of information to go through. Now, like I said, they would have a list of suspects, and one of them was a doctor, but nothing was ever proven. And I want to mention the doctor that caught my attention because I truly think that this might have been who ultimately ended Elizabeth's life. So, fast forward a little bit. Steve Hodel is a retired LAPD detective, and he actually grew suspicious after finding pictures of a woman among the possessions of his father. Now, his father was Dr. George Hill Hodel. Remember, doctor? I said doctor. The photo album was actually tucked away in a box, and it was like really small to where it fit in the palm of Steve's hand and was bound in wood. Now, in the album, it had pictures of his mom, of his dad, of his brothers, and himself, but towards the back of the album, this is when it caught Steve's eye. There were two pictures of a young woman. Her eyes were kind of downward. She had curly, deep black hair, and Steve still doesn't know why, but he had the idea, like automatically, as soon as he looked at the image, he had the idea and thought to himself, my God, that looks like the Black Dahlia. And so he came to believe that his father used his medical expertise to kill and mutilate Elizabeth. And not just Elizabeth, he was on a whole tangent that his father killed multiple people, that his father was actually a serial killer. So Hodel documented receipts that his father had of 5-pound bags of concrete for the same size and brand that were found near Elizabeth's body, were which, was believed to be the bags that transported her body and everything. He wrote about like his father's violent tendencies. Um, that his father was into a lot of mechanism, sado Masochism? You know what I'm trying to say. Sadoism. Okay. The suspicion that he killed his own secretary was actually a thing as well. And his father was actually accused of assault against his own daughter. Not Steve Hodel's daughter, that his sister, I should say. So against George Hodel's own daughter. he had accusations that he assaulted her. Now, George Hodel was actually a big suspect for the police, and so they actually wiretap the Hodel home, especially after kind of gaining new evidence. And on one of the tapes, Hodel Sr. was recorded as saying, quote, "Supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia. They can't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary anymore because she's dead. They thought there was something fishy. Anyway, now they have figured it out. Killed her." End quote. Okay, that's chilling. When I heard it, I was like, mm. So, I mean, now, even now, you know, it's still remains a mystery whether George Hodel actually did it, but the evidence is disturbing. And even though at least 8 witnesses made a connection with George Hodel and Elizabeth, justice was never served. Like there was no continuing on. And actually, Dr. George Hodel left overseas. I I wish I wrote it down, but he actually went overseas to where he couldn't be extradited. So he stayed there and never came back. He actually died over there. Seems kind of suspicious. Okay, you are accused of murder and you think you would like want to show them that you didn't do it, but instead he fled. Just that's some red flags. Red flags. Now, the younger Odell's search of the property in 2012 turned up soil samples that later tested positive for decomposed human remains. Huh? So, a cement sack, presumably, pres- you know what I'm trying to say, a cement sack used to transport the body actually matched the type bought for construction use at Hodel Sr.'s home. And handwriting experts deemed the lettering on the note, on like a taunting note that they received, to the note that was received to the press, was ultimately, I mean, it was inconclusive, but it was almost an exact match to the elder Hodel Sr.'s handwriting. Now, the Sun actually did summarize all of his findings in a 2003, I think it's like a bestseller. It was a best-selling book, but it's entitled Black Dahlia Adventure, The True Story. So if you do want to check that out, you can definitely go look at it. I am actually in the process of reading it. I will say there's a couple things too about I've seen Steve Hodel accused. I'm not sure if it's in this book yet. I think it was said that it was, but his Steve Hodel has even claimed that his father is the Zodiac killer. He said that his father actually was in a lot of these locations that the Zodiac killings was, and every time a killing happened there, his father was actually there, whether it was for medical or whatever else. I don't know if I believe that, but that was the assumption. Now, it's been almost 80 years, and still no one knows who killed Elizabeth. And again, like I said, Elizabeth was only 22 years old when her life was stolen from her. I mean, the reason I chose this one for my first story is because it's just so heartbreaking and infuriating and still compelling. And I'd be lying if I say it wasn't a compelling story. Elizabeth's name is too often buried beneath the gruesome details of her death and the circus that the media caused with a lot of false accusations. She was painted in a very bad lighting of being promiscuous and things like that. And I just felt like she deserved a person to tell the story of how it was and not make any assumptions because again, she was a real person. She was a dreamer. She was a young woman in love that wanted a family. And she was just trying to live her life the best that she could, given the circumstances that she had. You know, she had a father that walked out on her by pretending he committed suicide, and then wanted nothing to do with her still, even when she came, because she just wouldn't clean up after him and didn't even show up at her funeral. the one person she had was her mother and her sisters. But again, at one point, you kind of want to live your own life. And when she did think that she was about to start a life, it was stolen from her by Major Gordon giving up his life for the war. So I just wanted to pay her respect when it comes to the story, and I thought this would be a perfect first story for this. I do want to know what you think. Please let me know down in the comments. Do you believe Steve Hodell's theory, or is the truth still out there? Is it just buried beneath decades of lies and misdirection and false accusations? I mean, 60, 60 confessions, over 60 confessions, and it's just crazy to me. So, if you did make it this far, thank you for being here with me. I hope you've enjoyed this blend of creepy and creative, and let me know down in the comments if there's anything that I can change or do different because I definitely want to make sure that, you know, I am giving you guys the best that I can. I'm hoping this video wasn't too bad. I am going to try to do just a little bit more, and so I'll kind of spend the last couple minutes because I'm trying not to make these videos too long, but I'm going to try to finish this up if I can. Now, I will say you probably won't see it in this transition, but the paint that I'm using now is not Angelus. This is actually a fabric, like thermal paint. It's something new. I wanted to try to do something creative. So this color here is actually supposed to go from orange to red in sunlight. And then I have another one that I'm going to do. So the bud, I'm going to actually do a neon pink, and this will actually change to purple. I'm not sure if it'll work out that way, but I'm hoping so. I'm hoping it works out in my mind. But, you know, if you like what you're seeing, if you're interested in knowing about my shoes, I definitely am going to have everything linked down below. I will have my Instagram links, TikTok. Um, I thought about making an Etsy at one point, but I'm not entirely sure. But any links that I have, I will definitely list them down below. And I do love questions. And if you are an artist yourself and have any tips or tricks, please let me know because I would love to get advice, especially being new to putting myself out there. But yeah, I also want to give a shout out because this was really inspired by Bailey Sarian. And if you don't follow Bailey Sarian, please go give her a like and follow. She actually does makeup tutorial, like makeup. She does her makeup. And while she's doing her makeup, she tells a story because, she's trying to keep her hands busy. So I know it's awkward to do things like this when you tell like a true crime story or tell a story of something like this that's awful. And then you're like, oh, yeah, and I'm painting or I'm doing my makeup. Um, but yeah, give her a follow and a like. She's amazing. That's where I got my inspiration from. Um, and yeah, I I'm not really sure what else to say when it comes to this video. It is weird, I think, trying to end this because, what can you say? I've already said if you enjoyed this video and blend of creepy and creative, like, subscribe, and share this video if you enjoyed it. Now, I will drop episodes, like new episodes weekly. I will try to. I am new to this, so hopefully I can drop that weekly. If you have a story in mind, like I said, comment it down below. I'd love to try to interact with everybody and, put any videos out that people like. If you have an idea for a shoe, you can definitely let me know too. I will have all those links down below along with all the materials that I've used. Um, and yeah, I just love this idea where we're mixing true crime, mystery, and lore all while creating art. And if you are curious, I actually did do this after dark. I just have a light because it'd be very hard for you to see. So I am going to finish this part up right here. And yeah, I'm hoping this turns out okay. And hopefully it's not too simple of a design. I kind of wanted to keep it simple because, the story was just so complex. and has different layers, and I just wanted something simple and beautiful for Elizabeth. Um, Now this isn't a name brand shoe, if anybody's wondering. This is just a normal canvas shoe, but um, I have done, Vans and I've done Air Force Ones and things like that. But I like to draw on just plain shoes. I literally got this shoe from like Hobby Lobby. But yeah, I am just going to I'm just going to go ahead and wrap this up and finish it. So here we are. This is what the finished product looks like. I cleaned out all the edges and I did make sure to correct the black and everything. But hopefully you liked it. Until next time, stay curious, stay creepy, and stay creative. I'm Luna Vale, and this was Acrylic After Dark. Uh, Thank you guys so much for joining me, and I will see you on the next video.